The hallway is completely still. Emma's bag is on the floor. Not thrown down, not dropped in a dramatic gesture, set down. Deliberately. The way Emma does everything that matters to her, with the quiet intention of someone who has decided something and is not going back on it. The bag sits between her feet like a period at the end of a sentence she has been writing for 8 months without knowing she was writing it. Seo-jin is standing between her and the front door, not blocking it. They both know he is not blocking it. There is room on either side of him. She could walk right past him and he would let her, because the one thing Kang Seo-jin has never done is take a choice away from someone he. And here is where the internal vocabulary fails him. Here is where the 8 years of precise, surgical emotional removal runs directly into its own limit. Someone he cannot watch leave. Neither of them moves. Seoul outside the window is quiet in the way it only gets in the deepest hours of the night, when the city has stopped performing and is just existing, gray and enormous and indifferent to the fact that something enormous is happening in this hallway. The only sound is the particular silence that exists between two people who survived by going quiet and are now, for the first time, experiencing their silence as the loudest thing in the world. Emma looks at him. He looks at her. 8 months of everything unsaid fills the air between them. Every ceiling look, every anonymous kindness, every corporate sir, and every first good morning. The water glass in the dark and the blanket in the hallway and the hand over hers at the kitchen table and the first sentence he fought 8 years of armor to produce. All of it present. All of it enormous. All of it impossible to manage from a distance anymore. She set her bag down. He is still standing there. And here is the thing about two people who survived by going quiet. When they finally stop performing, when the armor is off and the walls are down, and there is nothing left between them and the true thing, the silence does not feel like distance anymore. It feels like the loudest thing in the world. Staying was the easy part. The hard part, the part that costs the most, the part that neither of them knows how to do, is what comes next. Being chosen. Out loud. In the light. With actual words. That is where this story begins. Before we go any further, if you are already back in this hallway like you never left, if Emma and Seo-jin have been living in your head rent-free since part 1, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, like this video immediately. Not at the end. Right now. Because the algorithm decides in the first 2 minutes whether this story deserves to be seen, and this story deserves to be seen. Second, if you are not subscribed yet, fix that right now. There is a whole library of stories like this one on this channel, and you do not want to find out about them late. Third, and this is the one I actually want, go to the comments right now and tell me this. Are you an Emma or a Seo-jin? Are you the person who jokes through everything because feeling it openly is too expensive? Or are you the person who funds the surgery and stocks the cabinet and sits in the chair for 4 hours and cannot, for the life of them, just say the words out loud? Because I think most of us are one or the other. And I think most of us have needed someone to see through whichever one we are. Every comment gets read. Every single one. Now, back to the hallway. Neither of them has moved yet. The morning arrives the way mornings always do, without ceremony, without caring what happened the night before. Pale light through expensive windows, and Seoul waking up outside like it has somewhere to be. Emma woke up in the guest room. The good one, south-facing, the one Seo-jin put her in when she had the fever. And she lay there for a moment in the specific stillness of someone registering that they made a decision last night, and the decision is still true in the morning, which is not always how decisions feel. Her bag was on the floor at the foot of the bed. She unpacked it, quietly, alone, without ceremony. The way she does everything that matters to her. She put her things in the drawers with the careful, deliberate movements of someone who understands that unpacking is the most permanent thing a person who lives out of a suitcase can do. She did not know if he heard her doing it. She suspected he did. She went downstairs at her usual time, and the kitchen told her everything before anyone said a word. He was not in it. But the kitchen had been in the kitchen, if that makes any sense at all. Her favorite breakfast on the counter, the specific one, not a guess, not a general attempt at something she might like. The one she described to Kofi during a phone call 6 weeks ago in the detail that people use when they are homesick and talking to the person who makes them feel least far from home. Warm, fresh, timed precisely for when she came downstairs, which meant he had been tracking her morning schedule with the same quiet precision he tracked everything that mattered to him. There was no note. There was never a note. Emma stood in front of it for a long moment. The thing that moved through her was complicated. She was moved, genuinely, in the specific way that she was always moved by his silent language, the language made entirely of actions and provisions and presences and absences that meant their opposite. She understood it. She had always been fluent in it. But standing in the kitchen in the morning light with the perfect breakfast in front of her, she felt, for the first time, the specific frustration that lives at the edge of being loved in a language that does not contain the words you need most. She ate the breakfast. It was perfect. Of course it was perfect. She thought about the water glass and the surgery and the spices and the chair and every single thing he had ever done instead of said, and she thought, I know you. I know what all of this means. And then she thought, quietly, with the honesty of a woman who was finally done pretending she wasn't tired, but I need to hear it. He appeared in the kitchen doorway mid-morning. The rolled-sleeve shirt. The composed expression of a man who had absolutely not been listening for the sound of her moving through the house since before 6 in the morning, and whose composure was performing significantly harder than usual as a result. She looked at him. He looked at her. The air between them had the texture of something new and enormous. The specific fragility of a thing that has not yet been named, and is therefore still breakable. Thank you for breakfast, she said. He nodded. I know what you're doing, she said. Her voice was easy, not accusatory, the voice she used when she was saying something difficult and wanted him to hear it rather than defend against it. The breakfast and the room and the schedule you quietly adjusted this week. I see it. I always see it. She paused. It's sweet. He waited. It's not enough, she said. The stillness that moved through him was not the strategic kind. It was the stillness of a man who has just received information he has no category for, who has been told, for the first time in 32 years, that what he gives is insufficient. Not cruelly, not with anger, just clearly, by a woman who was too honest and too tired and too real to pretend otherwise. What do you need? He asked. It came out quieter than he intended. Genuinely. Emma looked at him across the kitchen. I need you to stop funding things and start saying things, she said. Those are different. A surgery with no name on it and a sentence spoken to my face are not the same thing. I need you to know they are not the same thing. She picked up her coffee. She went to start her day. He stood in the kitchen doorway for a long moment after she left. Then he walked to his office. He sat at his desk. The report from Busan was there, as it always was, as it had been for months. The running symbol of everything he had refused to engage with, while something far more important was happening 20 feet away. He did not open it. He sat with Emma's words instead, turning them with the same analytical precision he applied to everything else in his life. Except this was not a problem that responded to analysis. He knew how to fund. He knew how to protect. He knew how to look at a situation and identify what it needed and provide it quietly and efficiently before anyone had to ask. He had been doing this his entire life. He was extraordinarily good at it. He did not know how to say, not because he didn't feel it. And here, alone in his office with no one watching, he allowed himself to be honest about that. He felt it in the specific way of a man who had cauterized feeling for 8 years and discovered that cauterized things do not actually stop existing. They just stop being accessible until the right person walks into your utility room at 2 a.m. and makes the scar tissue irrelevant. He felt it fully. He had felt it for months. What he did not have was the external vocabulary for it. The words, spoken aloud, to another person's face, with no distance and no transaction and nowhere to redirect if it became too much. Every word he had not said for 8 years was a wall. Every wall was a reason to believe he was safe. And Emma was asking him to take the walls down not with actions, which he could control, but with words, which lived outside of him and could not be recalled once released, and which made him visible in the most undefended way he could imagine. He understood this. He also understood, sitting alone in the cold office, that he was more afraid of losing her than he was of being visible. He opened his desk drawer. He looked at the repayment schedule in the careful 2-column handwriting. He looked at the note about the filing system, 11 words in slightly imperfect Korean that had made him read it 3 times on the day it arrived. He closed the drawer. He had no idea how to begin. But for the first time in 8 years, not knowing how to begin did not feel like a reason not to try. The threat came on a Tuesday. Emma's day off. The small grocery 2 streets away, the one with her specific brand of tea, The one she walked to because the 20 minutes there and back were the only 20 minutes of the day that belonged completely to her. No schedule, no household, no performance required. She was 2 streets from the house, not yet at the corner, when her phone buzzed. The guard's name on the screen. The one whose birthday she had remembered in the first week. Not because she was trying to make a point, but because Emma Osei paid attention to people the way most people paid attention to things they needed, and his birthday had come up in a conversation, and she had filed it away because that was what she did with information about people she respected. He had been quietly, unofficially loyal to her ever since, in the way that people became loyal to someone who saw them as a human being worth knowing rather than a security function to be navigated. His message was 4 words. Don't come back yet. He called 30 seconds later. He spoke carefully, in the measured way of someone who understood the full weight of the information they were carrying and had decided she was worth the risk of sharing it. He told her about the visa report. The irregularity, technical, bureaucratic, the kind that was almost impossible to fight without the right connections, the kind that had been engineered rather than discovered. He told her who filed it. He told her the timeline. Emma listened without interrupting. She said thank you. She hung up. She went into the small grocery. She bought her tea. She sat at the counter by the window with the tea in both hands, and she looked at the street outside, and she let herself feel afraid for exactly 90 seconds. The specific fear of a woman who has built something real in a place that did not belong to her, and is watching someone try to dismantle it. And then she opened her notebook. The small one. The one with the careful handwriting and the columns and the margins full of calculations that other people would not immediately recognize as calculations because they looked like notes, but were actually maps. She started writing. Not what do I do? Not how do I survive this? The question she was working was, how do we beat this? Because she had already decided, somewhere in the space between the phone call and the first sip of tea, that she was not leaving. Not because of the hallway. Not because of him. Because she was Emma Osei and she had not come to Seoul with 1 suitcase and no alternatives and a brother's life in the balance to be removed by a man in a nice suit who thought her job title told him everything he needed to know about her power. She mapped Jaewon's move. She identified what he had filed and where and the timeline and the mechanism. She found 3 vulnerabilities in it. 2 of them genuine procedural errors in his filing that invalidated significant portions of the report. One of them a chain of access she could not reach herself. She closed the notebook. She paid for her tea. She walked back to the house. She walked past both bodyguards with the same unbothered energy she had always walked past them. They moved aside for her automatically now, had been doing it for months, with the resigned warmth of people who had given up trying to apply standard protocols to someone who simply refused to be managed by them. She went to Seo-jin's office. She opened the door. She sat across from his desk, and she put the notebook down in front of him, and she looked at him steadily. Your underboss filed a visa irregularity report against me this morning, she said. Engineered, not discovered. The procedural trail is too clean for it to be accidental. The timeline gives us 4 days before it reaches the review stage. She tapped the notebook. I've found 3 vulnerabilities. 2 of them I can reach. The third one needs your access. Seo-jin had gone very still. Not the strategic stillness, something beneath that, something that was processing 2 things simultaneously. The threat, which his mind moved to neutralize with immediate cold precision, and the woman sitting across from him who had walked into the grocery store on her day off and come back with 70% of the solution already mapped. You found this yourself, he said. I found it first, she said. The distinction deliberate. You would have found it too. But I found it first. He looked at the notebook. At the columns, at the handwriting that was more precise than most people managed under ordinary circumstances, let alone under the specific pressure of discovering that someone was trying to remove you from the country on a Tuesday morning. He looked at the calculations in the margin and the 3 vulnerabilities she had circled and the chain of access marked with a question mark, because she did not have what she needed and had not pretended otherwise. Then he did something that cost him more than any single operational decision he had made in 8 years. He pulled his chair around to her side of the desk. He sat next to her, not across, not at the managed distance of employer and employee, or even of 2 people carefully negotiating something new. Next to the notebook between them now instead of between them, if that made sense, which it did to both of them immediately. Show me the third piece, he said. They worked. Emma's people. the guard, the two contacts she had cultivated through nothing more than basic human decency and the habit of remembering that everyone in a house like this was a person first. Her math, which was quietly extraordinary. Her ability to see the angles that weren't obvious because she had spent her whole life navigating systems that were not built with her in mind, and had become expert at finding the doors that weren't on the map. Seo-jin's access. His precision. The particular cold competence of a man who had been playing this specific game for 8 years and understood every move that could be made and every counter to every move, because he had made most of them himself at some point. Jae-won had built his move against Emma on the assumption that she was a vulnerability, soft, removable, an emotional lever to be pulled at the right moment, while the real power watched helplessly from behind his walls. He had not modeled a scenario in which she was sitting at Seo-jin's desk with a notebook and 3 of the 5 pieces before lunchtime. He had not accounted for the guard who remembered his name. He had not accounted for the 2 procedural errors in his own filing that Emma had found by reading the regulation documents he had assumed no domestic worker would think to access. He was removed. Cleanly. Without violence, which was not how these things usually went in this world, and which Emma noted with the private relief of someone who had been prepared for the possibility of worse. The visa report invalidated, legitimately, because the procedural errors were real and Emma's documentation of them was meticulous. The file on her dissolved. Jae-won removed from the inner circle of the Kong Empire with the specific finality of a door that locks from the inside and does not have a handle on the outside. Gone. The office was quiet afterward. The notebook closed. The job finished. Emma sat back in her chair and exhaled. Not dramatically, just the clean, specific exhale of a person who has been operating at full capacity and is now allowing their body to register that the immediate thing is over. Seo-jin was looking at her. She could feel it. She had always been able to feel when he was looking at her, even when she was pretending she couldn't. Even in the early months when he was being so careful, and she was being so careful, and they were both performing versions of themselves that neither of them actually was. You found 3 of the 5 pieces before you came to me, he said. I told you, Emma said. I was handling it. You were. His voice was different. Not the flat operational register. Something lower, with a frequency she had not heard from him before. The sound of a man revising a belief he had held for a long time and finding the revised version more true than the original. You were always handling it. Emma looked at him. I know, she said simply. I just wanted someone to handle it with me. He held this. She watched him hold it. Watched the sentence land somewhere deep in the architecture of who he was and find purchase there, in the specific region that had been so carefully cleared of anything that could be called a need. The corner of his mouth moved. Not the almost. The real one. Small, still, but a real smile. The kind that reached the slight crease at the outer corner of his eye that would be a laugh line someday, if he let himself laugh enough to earn it. She pointed at him. There. That one. I am keeping that one. He looked away. But he did not look at the ceiling. 3 days passed. The good kind of days. The kind that had a different quality to them now. Warmer and less careful. The specific ease of 2 people who have been through something real together and have come out the other side of it still standing next to each other. 2 cups of coffee in the morning. Good morning said like it was no longer a decision. The corner of the mouth thing happening with a frequency that Mrs. Park had privately begun to keep count of with the satisfied precision of someone who had been patient for 8 years and was now being paid back with interest. On the 4th morning, Emma set her cup down on the kitchen table and looked across at him. He was reading something. Actually reading it, present and focused. A different man in this kitchen than the one who used to take his coffee alone in his office and look at ceilings and treat warmth like a liability. Tell me something true, she said. He looked up. Out loud, she said. With words. Not a breakfast time to my schedule. Not spices from home in a cabinet. Not a chair outside a door. She looked at him steadily, with the patient expression of a woman who has decided this conversation is happening today and is entirely comfortable with however long it takes to get there. Just say a real thing. One real thing. I'll wait. She meant it about the waiting. She wrapped both hands around her cup, and she looked at him, and she did not move. Seo-jin looked back at her. Something moved behind his eyes. Then he opened his mouth. He started a sentence. It was formal, slightly grammatically strange. The way sentences become strange when they are being translated from an internal language into an external one by someone who has had no practice. He stopped it in the middle. He looked up, toward the ceiling. Ceiling, Emma said immediately, without inflection. He looked back at her. He tried again. This one was better. It got further. It built towards something real, something that had weight, something that was actually the thing he meant. It crashed into itself at the last word because the last word was the one that cost the most, and he could not yet locate it in the vocabulary he was using out loud. Only the one that lived entirely inside him, where it had been safe for 8 years. He stopped. He sat with the stopped sentence for a moment. Then he tried a third time. What came out was not poetry. It was not the declaration of a man who had always known how to do this, smooth and certain and arriving fully formed. It was halting. It was effortful. It was the deeply earnest attempt of someone learning a language in real time, in front of the person those words were about, with no distance and no protection and nowhere to look except directly at her. It was fractured in the way that true things are fractured when they have been held inside for too long and finally, at real cost, come out into the light. One sentence. He got one complete, true sentence out. He said her name first. The way he always said it, low and specific, like a word he had been thinking about for days. And then the rest of it, imperfect and genuine and entirely his. The words of a man who had just climbed 8 years of silence to say one true thing out loud. The kitchen was very still. Emma looked at him for a long moment. Something moved across her face that she did not perform and did not deflect and did not immediately translate into a joke to make the feeling smaller and safer. It moved through her openly. The way things moved through her when she forgot to manage them, or when she decided, consciously and with full intention, not to. Then she reached across the table. She put her hand over his. That, she said, and her voice was soft in a register she almost never used, the one underneath the bright voice and the performance voice, the real one, is the best thing you have ever said to me. Seo-jin looked at their hands. His jaw tightened slightly. Not with tension, but with the specific physical response of a man receiving something he was not certain he knew how to hold. It took 8 months, he said. Worth it, Emma said. He did not say more. Not today. And she did not ask for more, because she understood, with the intelligence she had always brought to everything about him, that this was not a wall that came down all at once. It had gone up stone by stone over 8 years. It would come down the same way, slowly and imperfectly, and at genuine cost, and trying to rush it would only make him feel like the cost had been too high. She had asked for one true thing said out loud. She had gotten it. She was going to let that be enough for today. She went back to her coffee. He did not pick up a document. He did not reach for the operational apparatus that had been his primary coping mechanism for the better part of a decade. He sat at the kitchen table, with her, doing nothing except being present in a room in the morning like a person who was learning, slowly, incrementally, in the specific way of someone who had forgotten, that being present in a room was allowed to be enough. Mrs. Park walked through on her way to the linen cupboard. She saw the hands, Emma's on Seo-jin's, neither of them pulling away, both of them simply there. She kept walking at exactly her usual pace. Her expression maintained the professional composure of a woman who had worked for this family since before the man at the table could walk, and who was currently exercising more restraint than she had exercised in the past 8 years combined. She allowed herself one very small smile. In the corridor, alone, facing the linen cupboard, where no one could see it. Then she counted it, added it to the list. Good things happening in this house, recorded internally, kept safe. 6 days later, Kofi called. He called on a Sunday evening, which was their usual time. The window Emma kept clear of everything else, the hour that belonged only to her brother, and to the specific warmth of hearing a voice that knew her before she was the strong one, before she was the competent one, before she was fine. His voice was lighter than it had been in months. The surgery was long behind him. Recovery was going well. He sounded like himself, the funny version, the version that could make Emma laugh from 4,000 miles away with the specific shorthand of two people who grew up in the same house and learned humor from the same table. He talked about the food in the hospital. He talked about the nurses. He made a highly detailed complaint about the television programming that made Emma press her hand over her mouth to contain the laugh because she did not want to interrupt the flow of it. She matched his energy, bright and warm and full of the exaggerated Seoul stories she had been collecting for exactly this purpose. The ones that made him laugh and feel close to her even across the distance. Near the end of the call, in the easy offhand way that siblings said the true things, sideways, without looking directly at them, because looking directly at them made them too real, Kofi said, "You've been there almost a year. You must have found something worth staying for, that isn't me." Emma laughed. She deflected. She was extraordinarily good at it. The redirect so smooth, so natural, so practiced over so many years that it arrived before the thought did. She said something funny about Seoul in the rainy season. Kofi laughed. The call ended with the usual warmth and the usual promises, and the usual "I love you" that meant everything and cost nothing, because it had been said so many times it had become as natural as breathing. She hung up. The bright voice went off. The way it always did after the call, like a light switched at the wall, the performance version of her returning to wherever it lived when it was not needed. The real silence arrived. The Sunday evening kind, the one that used to be the loneliest hour of the week when she first arrived, the one that had a different quality now, warmer, less hollow. She sat with her phone in her lap, and she did not reach for the armor. This was new. This was the thing that was different tonight, and that she understood, sitting with the phone in her lap in the quiet of her room, was something she needed to stay with rather than manage. Kofi's question, "You must have found something worth staying for," had gone somewhere deeper than the deflection could reach. It had found the thing she had been protecting behind the deflection and named it. She stayed because she wanted to. She let herself look directly at it. Not sideways, not through the performance of it, not disguised as something she was doing for someone else. She stayed because she wanted this. The 2 cups of coffee and the good mornings and the man who sat in a hallway chair for 4 hours and said her name like a word he had been thinking about for days. She wanted it not as a reward for saving Kofi, not as a side effect of being in the right place at the right time, not as something she had earned through sacrifice and service and being the strong one for long enough. She wanted it because she was a person and she was allowed to want things, and this was the specific thing she wanted. She had been the strong one since she was 17. She had held everyone's weight and made everyone laugh and been fine when she wasn't fine, and given and given and given with the particular generosity of someone who found it easier to give than to ask. She had come to Seoul to save her brother. She had done that. Kofi was well. Kofi was healed. The surgery was paid for and the recovery was complete, and the thing she had come here to do was done. And she was still here. Not for Kofi. Not for the contract. Not for any version of duty or sacrifice or being the strong one. For herself. Because she wanted to be here. Because Emma Osei, who had been giving since she was 17 and fine for even longer than that, was allowed to want something and take it. Something loosened in her chest that had been tight for 9 years. She felt it go, slowly, like the release of something that had been held under pressure for so long the holding had become invisible. She breathed. The real breath. The one she had been managing around for years without noticing. She got up. She went to find Seo-jin. Not urgently. Not with the bright performance face loaded and ready. Not with a joke to put between herself and the real thing, because the real thing was too large and too new and needed protection. Just herself. The actual version. The tired and warm and quietly brave one. Walking through the house in the evening light toward the person she had decided, consciously and completely, and without disguise, that she wanted to walk toward. He was in his office. She opened the door. She crossed the room and she sat in the chair across from his desk, and she looked at him, and she said nothing for a moment, and the moment was not uncomfortable because they had both learned, in the long months of this, that their silences did not require filling. "I stayed because I wanted to," she said. Her voice was even, clear, the voice of a woman saying something she had been working up to for 9 years. "Not because of you, for me. I want you to know the difference. I'm not here saving something or fixing something or being the strong one for something. I'm just here because I want to be here." She looked at him. "That's allowed, right?" Seo-jin looked at her for a long moment. The expression on his face was the one that had no name in either of their vocabularies yet, the one that had been building since the first time he looked at her in his study and felt the particular unease of encountering a variable he could not fully predict. It was in him fully now, undisguised. He was done disguising it. "That has always been allowed," he said. She breathed out. The real breath again. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay." She stayed in the chair. He did not pretend to read anything. The city outside went amber, and then dark, and the office held the specific peace of two people who had both, on the same evening, decided to stop performing and found each other still there on the other side of the stopping. Late evening. The kitchen. Seoul outside the window going the specific amber of a city settling into its night. The particular glow of 10,000 lit windows in a skyline that did not sleep so much as shift gears, quieter and slower, and somehow more itself after dark. The kitchen was warm. The light in it was the warm kind, the kind that made everything inside it look like something worth staying in. 2 cups on the table. This was default now. Unremarkable. The way things become unremarkable when they become true. Not a gesture anymore. Not a message. Not a silent sentence in the language of actions. Just 2 cups. Because there were 2 people, and this was where they had breakfast, and sometimes evenings, and occasionally the middle of the night when neither of them could sleep, which was most nights, which they had both stopped pretending was a coincidence. Emma was humming. Not quite a song. Something between a song and a rhythm. The kind of sound a person makes when they are somewhere they feel safe enough to make sound without thinking about it. It had been getting progressively closer to an actual song over the past few weeks. Mrs. Park had noted this with the private satisfaction of someone taking attendance on happiness and finding the numbers improving. Seo-jin was reading. Actually reading. Present and focused in the way he had been since the desk scene, since the side-by-side, since the moment he had pulled his chair around and sat next to her instead of across, and discovered that sitting next to someone was not the same as being undefended. He had been different in increments. Sitting in the kitchen, saying good morning without it being an act of will, asking questions that were not operational, about Port Harcourt in the rainy season, about Kofi's recovery, about the specific brand of tea she walked 2 streets to buy. Becoming, slowly and imperfectly, and in the particular way of a man who did not know how to rush anything that mattered. Someone who inhabited this house instead of occupying it. He put the document down. Precisely. Face down on the table, not slid aside, not dropped. Set down with the specific intention of someone who has decided that the thing in his hands is less important than the thing in the room. Emma looked up from her cup. He looked at her. Across the table. Across the 2 cups and the warm light and the amber city outside the window and everything that had happened in this house over the past 8 months. The ceiling looks and the corporate sir and the anonymous surgery and the spice cabinet and the chair and the blanket and the hand over his on the kitchen table and the fractured first sentence that cost him everything and was worth every cent of it. She looked back. Mrs. Park had gone to her room an hour ago. She had gone with the particular timing of someone who had developed an instinct, over 8 years, for when to absent herself, and tonight her instinct had been especially precise. The house was quiet. The city was quiet. There was no one in the kitchen except the 2 of them, and everything unsaid that had been waiting for this moment with significantly more patience than either of them had managed. Seo-jin opened his mouth. He said it. Not the fractured attempt from the kitchen table 4 days ago. Not the anonymous action translated into almost language. Not the funding transfer with no name on it, or the note-free cabinet, or the 4-hour vigil in a decorative hallway chair. The full true thing. All of it. In the right order. In the voice that had always been different when it was for her. Low and specific and real in the way that things are real when a person has decided, completely, and without reservation, that they are done protecting themselves from their own truth. He said her name first. He said everything after it. Emma was very still. She had the expression of someone receiving something they had been waiting for long enough that the actual arrival of it needed a moment to be believed. She let the moment exist. She did not deflect into it, and she did not deflect away from it. She simply received it, openly, with the specific quiet of a woman who had learned, in the past few weeks, that being received was allowed, and that receiving was the same skill. The kitchen held the words. "I know," she said. He blinked. "You knew?" The slight lift in his voice, something almost incredulous, almost amused, the specific bewilderment of a man who climbed 8 years of silence to say something out loud, and has just been told the person already knew. "I counted the chair hours," Emma said. Her voice had the soft warmth of someone who has been keeping a secret with great affection and is now releasing it. "I did the math. You sat outside my door for 4 hours in a decorative hallway chair with the Busan report open on your lap, Seo-jin. A report you have not once read in 8 months. I am very good at math. I have always been very good at math. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not the almost this time. Not the half-second flicker that arrived and disappeared before anyone outside their world could have clocked it. This one stayed. Small, still, but real, and warm, and entirely, completely his. But, Emma said, quieter now. The humor's still there, but underneath it something truer, something that had been living in the warmest part of her for months. It was really good to hear. He reached across the table. His hand covered hers. The mirror of the moment 4 days ago, except reversed. Him reaching for her, deliberate and unhurried, and certain in the specific way he was certain when he had finished calculating and made the decision and was not going back on it. His hand over hers on the kitchen table in the warm light of a late evening in Seoul, in the most dangerous house in the city, in the kitchen that used to echo with only the sound of one person's footsteps. I'll say it again, he said. Emma looked at him. Yeah. As many times as you need. She was quiet for a moment. Outside, Seoul kept going. Enormous and amber and indifferent and beautiful. The way it had been the first morning she arrived with her one suitcase and her nerve and her brother's hospital files on her phone and the absolute necessity of being fine. She thought about that woman in the taxi looking at the city through the window. She thought about the utility room at 2 a.m. and the glass of warm water that appeared beside her in the dark, set there by hands that did not know how to say anything yet, but knew how to show up. She thought about the repayment schedule in 2 columns, and the filing system note in slightly imperfect Korean, and the first good morning and the breakfast time to her footsteps, and all the ways this man had been speaking to her in the only language he had while he was slowly, painfully, learning the one she needed. He knows how now, she thought. I'm going to need it a lot, she said quietly. Not performance. Not deflection. Just the truth of a woman who had spent 9 years being fine for everyone else, and had finally, in a kitchen in Seoul with warm light and 2 cups of coffee, decided that needing something was not a burden she was placing on someone else. It was an invitation. It was the bravest thing she knew how to say. I know, he said. She turned her hand over under his. She held it. Okay, Emma Ose said. For the last time. For the first time, meaning it all the way down. Not the bright voice okay. Not the I'm fine okay. Not the somebody has to be okay that she had been carrying since she was 17. This one was different. This one was the okay of a woman who had set her bag down in a hallway and meant it, who had unpacked her things in a room that was not temporary, who had asked for one true thing and received it, and was going to ask for more and receive more, and was allowed to do both. Okay. And that is where we leave them. 2 cups. Warm light. Hands held across a kitchen table in the quietest, most dangerous house in Seoul. A man who spent 8 years learning that love made people reachable and finally, at the cost of every wall he built, decided that being reachable was worth it. A woman who spent 9 years being strong for everyone else and found, in a city that was nothing like home, the first place where someone looked at her real face and did not ask her to put the other one back on. This story was about a great many things wearing the costume of a slow burn romance in a crime empire in Seoul. Underneath the glass of warm water and the anonymous surgery and the corner of the mouth thing that all of us became unreasonably invested in, it was about something much simpler and much harder. It was about the masks we build to survive and the specific, enormous cost of keeping them on after the danger has passed. Emma's humor and Seo-jin's coldness were the same armor in different colors, both built by people who loved deeply and got hurt at the wrong age and made a decision, without fully deciding, that feeling things openly was simply too expensive. Most of us know one of these people. Most of us are one of these people. The lesson underneath their story is not that love fixes this. It is that the right person makes the armor feel heavier than it used to. Makes you aware, for the first time, of what it has been costing you every single day. It was about the difference between solving someone and witnessing them. Seo-jin's first language was always provision. Fund the problem, remove the obstacle, make the thing better from a safe distance. Emma did not want to be solved. She wanted someone to sit in a chair outside her door and still be there at midnight. The most profound thing one human being can offer another is not rescue. It is presence. It is the willingness to stay in the difficult thing without an agenda, without a transaction, without needing the staying to mean something it can be later called in as a debt. It was about worthiness, the quiet lie both of them were rehearsing. Emma believed she was only worth what she could give. Seo-jin believed he was too broken to deserve anything good without it being used against him. These are lies that feel like truth because they have been practiced for so long they have become fluent. But a lie spoken long enough in the dark does not become a fact. It becomes a habit. And habits, unlike truths, can be unlearned. Slowly, imperfectly, in kitchens and corridors and hallways at midnight, by people who are brave enough to try. And it was about the courage of softness. In a world that rewarded his coldness and her unbreakable strength, the bravest thing either of them did in this entire story was not fight or outmaneuver or survive. It was the small, enormous, terrifying choice to be tender. A glass of water in the dark. A blanket on a sleeping man. A bag set down on a hallway floor instead of carried out the door. A sentence said out loud to someone's face after 8 years of silence. These are the moments that cost the most. They are also the ones that last. If this story found you, if Emma's humor made you laugh while something in your chest hurt a little, if Seo-jin's silence made you think of someone who loves inactions because words feel like exposure, if the blanket in the hallway or the 2 cups or the first good morning got to you the way quiet things always get you the hardest, then this story did exactly what it was built to do. It reminded you that the people who are always fine need someone to ask twice. That the people who go cold when they are scared are not cold all the way through. That love is not always loud. Sometimes love is warm water in the dark and a name in a desk drawer and 4 hours in a hallway chair and not saying the words yet, but absolutely, completely, staying. Thank you for spending this time with Emma and Seo-jin. Thank you for every comment about whether you are an Emma or a Seo-jin, because those comments prove that this story was not about 2 fictional people in a house in Seoul. It was about something you recognized, something you have lived or are living or are hoping for. Thank you for being the kind of person who watches a story about 2 lonely people finding each other in a cold house and feels it like it happened to someone you know. Maybe it did. Like this video if Emma and Seo-jin earned it, and they did. Subscribe so you are here for whatever comes next. And go to the comments right now and tell me the moment that got you most. The warm water, the blanket, the 2 cups, the hand across the table, the first good morning, the words finally said out loud. Tell me. I read every single one. Thank you for staying until the last word. The best stories always end with someone choosing to stay.